What is up, guys? Welcome into episode number 110 of the Loose Sports Talk podcast. I am your host, Ethan Hannaford. He is Daniel Hinkamp. These are always a lot more fun to do when a team that we're covering is good or is playing good ball. And right now, the St. Louis Cardinals could not be exceeding expectations much more than they are. Daniel Hinkamp, how are you doing, my friend?
I am great. I am very happy about the product that I've seen on the field from Cardinals baseball so far this year. Really excited to talk about it. Ethan, how are you?
Like I said, I could not be that much better being the way in which the St. Louis Cardinals have been performing as of late. So let me go ahead and give you guys the layout as to why I am so excited for this episode. Here in just a moment, we're going to begin navigating what is leading to the St. Louis Cardinals' success and why is there legitimate reason to be optimistic about the future because of what we have seen in the early going of 2026. Then later in the episode, mixing things up. Usually when we have guests on, we have them on the front end. We're going to be pushing towards the later part of the episode. Cardinals writer for MLB.com, Brendan Schaeffer, also our very own here at STL Sports Central. Brendan Schaeffer going to be joining us to discuss the Cardinals' early season success, who has contributed to it, who have been some of these big players. And on top of that, maybe some questions about some position battles and how things could look as the year continues to move forward. So very much so looking forward to having Brendan Schaeffer on here in just a little bit. But before that, let's go ahead and dive into how the Cardinals got from where they were last week when we were discussing some of the concerns. How could things potentially start to move in a bad direction compared to where we are now, talking about a red-hot Cardinals team? So let's go ahead and set the scene from last week's episode. Just before we hit the record button, the Cardinals had begun a 17-game stretch that would include no off days, 0. That stretch began with St. Louis getting swept at home against the Seattle Mariners. The Cardinals would then head out on the road and face off against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the series, let's just say that the way that the Seattle series finished, the Pirates series began in a similar sort of way. Not that the Cardinals played poorly against Seattle, but the struggles, it looked like this was going to turn into a 4-game losing streak because through 6+ innings of that first game against the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Cardinals were being no hit. And it came down to the 9th inning when Pedro Pages, JJ Wetherholt would both hit solo home runs to tie the game. A couple of guys would reach base. Jose Fermin would double in 2 runs, and the Cardinals would win that game 4-2. And all of a sudden, they would not look back from that point on. St. Louis would dominate offensively in that series against the Pittsburgh Pirates with wins by final scores of 11-7, 5-4, and 10-5. The offense was lights out, and a young team in the Pittsburgh Pirates that has some potential for this year. Listen, they were projected by a lot of people to finish ahead of the Cardinals in the NL Central Division race. Still could certainly happen, but the Cardinals just made them look like little brother last week. The Cardinals carried that success back home to St. Louis when they would meet up with the back-to-back world champion Los Angeles Dodgers. And, well, that didn't matter to the Cardinals because the success would continue for them with big wins, 7-2 and 3-2 in the first 2 games of that series. The Dodgers were able to take Game 3. That would end a 6-game win streak for the Cardinals. Have already won 5 straight, at least twice in 2026. So the Cardinals sweep the Pittsburgh Pirates in 4 games. They take 2 out of 3 against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now currently facing off in a series against the Milwaukee Brewers. Only the second time that they have faced an opponent in the National League Central this season. Were able to take Game 1 on Monday night by a 6-3 final. Beat the Brewers pretty handily. Did not end up playing on Tuesday night because of weather in St. Louis. So as we're recording here, the Cardinals 21-14 and doing all of the right things. Daniel, there's a lot of different directions that we could go from this point, but I think we first just have to acknowledge how impressive it is that once things get more difficult, it seems like the Cardinals have almost turned it up a notch and have seemed so composed through it all. Even in the low moments that we have seen early on in the season, we're only 6 weeks in, but there have been several bumps as projected. That we haven't seen the Cardinals falter, but we also in these big moments haven't seen them flying high, no pun intended either. We've seen them playing a consistent, good brand of baseball, regardless who is on the other side, and it's translated in a lot of different areas on the diamond. It is not one specific area that is carrying that heavily, and I think that there's a lot of good things to say about what we have seen in the early going from the St. Louis Cardinals team.
Yeah, they had a really strong last series against the Dodgers, especially and you mentioned that obviously they lost the Sunday game, but Friday and Saturday, I actually had the pleasure of being at the Saturday game down at Busch Stadium and watched just an absolute show coming from the middle infield, specifically with JJ Wetherholt. Beautiful, beautiful diving catch to actually double up a runner at first base to turn a double play on Shohei Ohtani, tracked back into short right field on his backhand, fielded a ground ball, and in the same turnaround motion, threw to Masyn Winn at second, and then Masyn Winn fired a 100-mile-per-hour strike over to Alec Burleson at first base to double up another runner. So it's a fun team to watch in the field. The pitching still is a little bit of a question mark, although Michael McGreevy looked great in that Saturday start, if you ask me. But the success is, before the season started, I didn't think it would be like this. I thought maybe, it'd be a little fun at the start, but this team is a lot of fun to watch. You can tell they're just having fun playing baseball and that they love the game. So my question for you, Ethan, is what is contributing to the success lately? And even to go a step further, who have been some of the biggest contributors on the offensive side?
First off, I love the mention of the defense and those two specific plays because the defense has been really good to start off the season once again, and it was going to have to be. We know that this pitching staff is pitch to contact. There's not a lot of strikeout stuff. We talked about that on last week's episode. Just to clarify real quick too, I know that the Cardinals weren't expected to have this game-changing starting rotation. I know that, but those are some of the things that you're looking at in order to gauge success. And the starting rotation as a whole has not been great this year. You've seen bits and pieces of good, and it's gotten better in recent games from Dustin May. It's looked pretty good recently from Michael McGreevy. Matthew Liberatore trying to figure some things out. But when you look at the last, couple of weeks of starts, it has been improving certainly for the Cardinals as far as being able to pitch deeper into games, limit run totals, not allow for the pitch to contact, sometimes hard contact, to hurt them that much because they have a great defense playing behind them. Let's hope that that is to hold and that we continue to see some improvements from the starting pitching. But yes, I have several names, several players, Daniel, that I think have been contributing to the St. Louis Cardinals this year that give great reason for excitement for the future. If you remember the month of May in 2025, the Cardinals had a phenomenal run. They went 19-8. They had the best record in baseball in that month and were 8 games over 500 going into the month of June. There was a lot of excitement. Oh man, we figured it out. The Cardinals are back. And then they hit a wall from that point. The question that I'm going to be basing is there reason to be more excited, to look at it any differently right now than we did last year? Or are we just all kind of bitten by the snake again, and maybe this team runs into some bumps along the way? Well, I'll let you guys be the decider of that, but let's go ahead and talk through some of the team's success as a whole offensively that has led and contributed to the St. Louis Cardinals being able to be so effective in the early going of the season. And then once we get through that, we'll dive into some of the individual pieces of that success. I guess you could argue maybe some of the formula that has led to the Cardinals' early season success. So let's talk through some of these team numbers. The St. Louis Cardinals are 6th in baseball in home runs hit to start off the season, 7th in runs driven in. This is a team that is being able to utilize power. Who would have thought going into the year that that would be one of the strengths of the St. Louis Cardinals team? Well, it has been. They're 8th in Major League Baseball in slug percentage, 6th in expected slug, so they should be doing even better than they are. The OPS is also top 10 in baseball, along with the team's weighted runs created plus is at 106, which means that they are hitting 6% above league average. Their expected weighted on base average is 7th in baseball as well. The point being is that when you put it all together, the Cardinals are consistently performing with some of the best in Major League Baseball, and it's only gotten better as the year has gone on. Since the Houston series, which was April 16th, 17th, somewhere around then, you could also argue that the competition has gotten a little bit tougher since that point as well for the Cardinals. They are top 5 in total runs. They are 11th in hits. They are top 5 in doubles, 6th in home runs, 4th in runs driven in. They're also 4th in stolen bases, so they're being aggressive on the base paths, top 10 in both on-base percentage, slug percentage, 6th in OPS, 6th in WRC+. This is a team that has gotten better as the year has gone on against tougher competition, and I think there is something to say about that. Like I said just a couple of minutes ago, is that it doesn't matter who is on the other side. The approach stays the same, in which the Cardinals are preparing and getting ready to go and face off against these pitchers. And at least to this point, it's worked. So you hope that that's able to continue. Now, I mentioned that we were going to dive specifically into who are the big pieces on this Cardinals team that have helped carry some of that success. Yes, I do believe that from top to bottom, it's been a pretty consistent product, but there are a handful of guys in the lineup that you look at and you're saying, okay, that's why I'm excited about the future, because these guys are performing right now. So let's go ahead and talk about it. It all starts with the top of the lineup. And at the top of the lineup in all of the start of 2026 has been the Cardinals' shining star in JJ Wetherholt, who is the number 5 prospect in Major League Baseball, the Cards' top prospect in the last probably 20 years at least. The expectations going into the year, I think, were pretty high for JJ Wetherholt, because really, when you look at where this franchise was, they need someone to be able to carry them and be the face of a rebuild. And JJ Wetherholt has been just about everything that you could hope for to start off his Major League career. When you compare him among qualified rookies in Major League Baseball, he is at the top of basically every single category. He is leading all qualified rookies in runs scored. He's top 5 in hits. He's 7th in doubles. He's 4th in home runs, something that we didn't expect, really. You know, we know that he showed the profile in Memphis, but it's a totally different game, right? Once you start facing off against Major League hitting, well, the power has carried from AAA to the majors with 7 home runs to start off the year, 18 driven in as well. He has such a good awareness of the strike zone and knowing what to swing at, what to lay off of. His strikeout percentage is at 17.9% as we speak. That is top 10 among qualified rookies in Major League Baseball. 4 stolen bases puts him at the top 5 in that category. Get this, the batting average, I didn't mention it. It's at 246, which is 13th among qualified rookies. It's fine. It's not out of this world. But the on-base percentage is at 360. It's over a point above where the batting average is, even when he has had his moments of, that getting as low as maybe 210 at points earlier in the season. He's still finding ways to get on base, and that is something that is so impressive for a guy that is so young. Going back to the power, slug percentage, 440, that's 7th in baseball. The expected slug is even higher than that. It's at 454. An 800 OPS puts him at the top 10 in Major League Baseball. He's also in the top 10th, 6th in weighted runs created plus and xWOBA among qualified rookies. So I don't know if you guys have paid attention to this rookie class. Most years with these numbers, JJ Wetherholt is leading just about every single rookie category. This is probably one of the better rookie classes that, eventually you'll be able to look back on and say, yep, that guy was in that class, that guy was in that class, that guy. Like, there is a lot of big names that are probably going to end up having very successful major league careers. And JJ Wetherholt is on pace with all of them. I would argue that his rookie of the year odds early in the season are just as good as anyone's. I would argue that they're probably better than most because we have seen him, even in 6 weeks of play, continue to get better and better. That doesn't even mention his defensive numbers, where he is impressed extremely well at second base. This is a guy that, yes, rookie of the year certainly is going to be in the mix for it. But we're also talking about a guy, even 6 weeks in, that is already in the conversation, in my opinion, for better second baseman in Major League Baseball. That is how impressed I have been with JJ Wetherholt in the early going to start off his Major League career. Daniel, your thoughts?
Yeah, and it's just super refreshing to see somebody come into the organization that has that potential to be a superstar talent with just how good he is and how he's such a good hitter. He's always in the right spot defensively, it seems like. He's also smart at the plate too. When with a rookie coming to the plate, you'd think that maybe he'd have a little less plate discipline, he'd be swinging at
Yeah.
pitches that down and away here and there, and it happens from time to time, but the discipline at the plate's been something that I've been very pleasantly surprised by, and how he's taking pitches that he should and hitting pitches in the right spot and driving some really good pitches as well.
When you combine his zone awareness on top of his batted ball ability and then throw in the sweetener of he's also hitting for power, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is amazing what you are getting from JJ Wetherholt in his first 6 weeks of Major League Baseball. But he's not the only one. You mentioned the word superstar, and there's another name for the Cardinals that has been putting up superstar-like numbers to start off the year, and that is Jordan Walker, who I think that a lot of people had their backs kind of turned on to start off 2026. I don't think that anyone has changed their career arc more than Jordan Walker has to start off the year. On the season, Walker batting .308 with 10 home runs, a .962 OPS, 27 runs driven in. We have talked in previous episodes about how good his start has been and what has contributed to his success at the plate, his ability to make adjustments. But I want to go back to a quote from Kyle Sixta right here on the Loose Sports Talk podcast. Several episodes ago, I believe it was actually our post-opening day episode where Walker had a great first weekend to start off the season, where he said something along the lines of, how would we know if Jordan Walker's early season success is legitimate, if he has truly changed? It's how he looks once he's in a slump. How does he respond once the bat has cooled off, once he's not seeing the ball as well? Listen, slumps are inevitable. They're going to happen, even to the game's best. How is he going to respond in that moment? Will he revert to old habits, or will he figure it out and make adjustments and get back to hitting the ball well? And here the last several weeks should tell the story for Jordan Walker and why he is a different baseball player now than he was even 6 months ago, 8 months ago. From April 18th to April 27th, Jordan Walker had 29 at-bats. He had 5 hits during that time, a .172 batting average. The power disappeared, no home runs. He struck out in 14 of those 29 at-bats. That's a strikeout percentage of 40%. His WRC plus was 63, 37 points below league average. Just to make it clear, WRC plus, weighted runs created, and then the plus just means that the league average is set to 100. So if you are below that, it means you're a certain level below league average. If you're above that, you're a certain level above league average. So if the league average is 100, Jordan Walker, during that stretch of April 18th to April 27th, his WRC plus was 63, so hitting well below league average. Goes into the cage. makes some adjustments with hitting coach Brant Brown. They see some things to tweak, some things that he has been struggling with. What do? They fix them. And he has applied those to the game. He did not press. He did not stress out. He applied and made some adjustments. And since April 28th, Jordan Walker, 11 hits and 25 at-bats, a 440 batting average, 2 home runs, only 4 strikeouts in that time. The WRC plus during that time, 231. So Jordan Walker, yes, a small sample size of struggle, but also a great job of being able to work through those struggles that were less than 10 days long and being able to find a way to contribute again to the lineup. Like I said, guys are going to struggle, especially in a year like this. Guys are going to have their moments of not seeing the ball well. Jordan Walker minimized the amount of time that was, and now he's back to mashing baseballs like he has been for the large majority of the year. So those are the 2 first guys that I wanted to note to start off the episode as to why the Cardinals have been contributing in the early going of 2026. Diving into our next Cardinal that has been contributing big time to the success that the lineup has been experiencing, it's none other than Ivan Herrera. Listen, if you've watched the entirety of the season so far, you know that it took Ivan Herrera's bat a little while to get going offensively for St. Louis. But if you were worried at any point, well, you shouldn't have been, and here's why. Even when he was batting as low as he was at one point, it was down to 194 on April 15th. At that point, his on-base percentage was 386. The next day, it climbed to 398, just under 400. Ivan Herrera, even when he wasn't able to put bat to ball, the contact wasn't as well as any of us were hoping that it would be. He was still able to see the ball well enough to find ways to get on base. I cannot even process how good of an on-base percentage 400 is when you're not even batting 200. And that is basically what Ivan Herrera did in the early going of 2026. And now he has began to heat up. Since April 16th, he's batting .310 with 3 home runs, 5 doubles, an on-base percentage of 452, a slugging percentage of 552, and the WRC plus is at 187. So things are certainly clicking right now for Ivan Herrera. And it's not like this is a surprise. Listen, we saw this in 2025 from Ivan Herrera. We know just how good he can be with the bat in his hands. It was just a matter of when was it going to click. And like I said, we saw him take those steps last year. So this year is more so just the expectation that it's going to continue, that he's going to be able to do it for a full season, not because at any point last year he struggled, but more so because he battled injury. Ivan Herrera is doing it, and I expect him to do this, but it is exciting to see that bat really get going because he is such a pure hitter at the plate.
Yeah, and he just knows the strike zone, and the plate discipline is there, and that comes a little bit, knowing the strike zone comes a little bit from being behind the plate a little bit this season with the new strike zone that the umpires are putting out there. But May the 5th, the Cardinals had second and third against the Milwaukee Brewers. They walked JJ Wetherholt to load the bases, bringing in Ivan Herrera, who absolutely laced one into the left center field gap and cleared the bases, and he was fired up on second base, and it was very fun to see.
Yes, and when you look at the top half of this lineup, Daniel, that is what they can provide together. I know that wasn't entirely the first 5 in this lineup, but Ivan Herrera certainly a great example of just how good the top half of this order has been. So let's go ahead and continue to discuss just how impactful the heart of this Cardinals batting lineup has been, and we move on with the Cardinals shortstop, Masyn Winn. Listen, it was never a question as to if Masyn Winn was going to be able to be the best defensive shortstop in Major League Baseball, or should I say at least in the National League. It's 1A, 1B between him and Bobby Witt Jr. on the other side of the state of Missouri. But the reigning National League Gold Glove Award winner was never in question as to whether he was going to be able to continue producing defensively. When you look at the glove, you look at the arm, there was never any questions about that. But there had been some concerns from fans in recent weeks. You know, when you look at the slow start to 2026 on top of the disappointing 2025 that he had at the plate. Well, just a few weeks ago, Masyn Winn silenced the critics and has kept them silent ever since. I don't know what it is about hometowns, but Masyn Winn certainly had quite the homecoming ceremony in Houston, Texas, the week of April 17th, the weekend of April 17th, I should say. Going into that weekend series against the Astros, Winn was batting only 189, but something awoke down in Houston. Since April 17th, Masyn Winn, 21 hits and 62 at-bats. That is a .339 batting average, hitting 34% above league average. The WRC plus is at 134. Listen, we know that this guy has the ability to hit. We saw it in 2024 when he put together a pretty sharp year front to back end, and I think really elevated the expectations that he could have with the bat in his hands. Disappointed in 2025, as I said. We're starting to see that bat awake a little bit more for him, and that's been a super encouraging sign. The biggest thing for Masyn Winn is that he needs to get on base a little bit more in different ways. He's not going to hit 340 forever. I would love it as much. I would love it if he would, but nobody hits 340 anymore in Major League Baseball. His walk rate has been pretty low to start off the season. I would like to see him get on base a little bit more via the base on balls, just so that there is a little bit of versatility in the ways in which he can get on base. We know how difficult it is to hit at the major league level. You have to be able to find different ways to get on base. And if Masyn Winn would be able to improve the approach, continue working on the approach, it's been something he's been zeroing in on in 2026. If he's able to find different ways to get on base, then all of a sudden you aren't a slave to your batting average. And with a guy like Masyn Winn, he's not going to slug all the time. I know he's shown the ability at times to have it, but it's not going to be the centerfold of his game. Offensively, he has to be able to find different ways to get on base. That's going to be a huge key for Masyn Winn. Regardless, what we've seen from his bat has been super encouraging, that he can be a piece for the Cardinals then that can contribute offensively. And then last but not least, the reigning National League Player of the Week, Alec Burleson. Something awoke in Burley's bat as well of recent. It took a little bit longer than it did for Winn, but Burley had also had some early season success, more so than Masyn had. Following the series at home where the Cardinals got swept by the Seattle Mariners, his bat really figured it out. This past week, while earning the National League Player of the Week award, a .407 batting average, he led the National League in total bases, runs batted in, and he was second in hits and runs scored. Had a .484 on-base percentage in that time, and also had an OPS over 1,200. This was following a week where he was making very little contact. He was striking out a lot, wasn't seeing the ball very well. Great adjustments made by Alec Burleson to have him hitting as well as he is right now. Daniel, all of a sudden, you look at the success that the Cardinals have been able to have, and there is a formidable packing punch that they have been able to show 1 through 5 in this lineup, and it creates some legitimate excitement as that really has us asking the question, could this success be a little bit more legit than people thought that we were going to see from the St. Louis Cardinals? That's something that we're going to have to ask Brendan Schaeffer here in just a moment, who's going to be joining us on the other side right here on the Loose Sports Talk podcast. Welcome back to the Loose Sports Talk podcast on STL Sports Central. Ethan Hannaford and Daniel Hinkamp Pleased to be introducing our next guest into the fold. He is Brenden Schaeffer. He is a St. Louis Cardinals writer for MLB.com and our very own here at STL Sports Central. He is also the host of The Big Show on KTGR, where they're talking always Mizzou basketball, football, everything Como. He's also the host of B Shafe Daily, where you can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, pretty much anywhere that you can watch or listen to podcasts. You can find that. And he's also a great follow on X at bschaefer12. Brenden, before we get started talking about the nitty-gritty of Cardinals baseball, first, I just have to congratulate you on the new gig working with MLB.com. You've been doing it now for several weeks. How cool has it been to be working in this new position, representing the St. Louis Cardinals for Major League Baseball?
Oh, it's been really cool. It's been an awesome opportunity to cover the vast majority of Cardinals home games, and even recently getting to go to Pittsburgh for that trip was a lot of fun. So just kind of getting my feet wet in that world of covering the team for MLB.com, and being, boots on the ground as much as you can possibly be is, as you know, Ethan, a great way to kind of have insight on what's going on with the team. So to be doing that for that platform this year has been a dream for sure. It's been a lot of fun.
Such a cool opportunity. So excited for you, man. And I can't think of, at least in recent memory, let's say post Albert era, of a better time to be covering the St. Louis Cardinals than what is happening right now, with the way in which the team has been playing, exceeding expectations, and then to go a level even deeper into that the past week and a half or so, where we have seen them really respond after a disappointing series sweep against the Seattle Mariners. It looked like that losing streak was going to add on into Pittsburgh. They have several pivotal moments during that series. They have the late inning comeback. They beat Paul Skeens, and then the great series win against the Dodgers. So let me ask you this. Does it feel like along the way, at any point in the past week and a half or so, since this 17-game stretch began, does it feel like to you there was a pivotal moment in it all that kind of made some of this kickstart? Or does it more so to you feel like this is just the style in which this team plays? It's a consistent day in and day out preparation, and that's just what you're going to get from them. And at times there's going to be bumps along the way. What have you seen?
Yeah, I don't know if you could really say there was a moment that kind of supercharged it, because you think about the way that they have done it in pockets where, the Houston series, they executed against a team that had been struggling on the mound, and they kind of made Houston look that way. So like they're taking advantage of what the opponents are providing them. I look at that Seattle series and don't really think they played a bad game in the bunch. I know they got swept, but I don't really feel like that was your typical sweep where, you go down in three straight and you are feeling really bad about the way things went. Like there were just moments in those games where they just didn't quite have enough to be able to get a win, but I don't think they came away from any of those feeling terribly about the way things went. Obviously, Monday in Pittsburgh, you could point to in a more recent sense and say they were down and out in that game. They were getting perfect game through the first 6 2/3, and then to come back at the end and win that game. I think that was an embodiment of the type of team that they want to be, but I don't necessarily think that came out of nowhere either. Like I think they were putting together the days to be able to have something like that and produce that. And then they end up doing it in the rest of the Pittsburgh series. They beat the Dodgers, even in the loss on Sunday to LA. You could say, it didn't strike out once until the ninth inning. So like the consistency of what they've been doing, results or not, has been pretty impressive if you look underneath the hood.
Well, let's talk about some of these building blocks that Chaim Bloom certainly is hoping can continue progressing and eventually become some cornerstone pieces for the St. Louis Cardinals. None has been bigger, you could argue, or has attracted more attention, I should say, than JJ Wetherholt, the Cardinals' shining star, who has exceeded just about every single expectation that I think one could place on him in the early going of his rookie season. Let me ask you this. What stands out the most to you about JJ Wetherholt?
I think the fact that he is hitting for the power so far that he has is something that I didn't necessarily expect. Um, Everything else that we've seen, the good on base skill, the bat to ball skill, I think about a double he had in Pittsburgh where the pitch was up and away and he just slapped it the other direction, but it went to the wall. Like really, really surprising power when you see a swing that doesn't necessarily put everything into it, but he's got power. We shouldn't be surprised by it. But I didn't think he was necessarily going to come right in and be a guy who would track for 25 home runs, which is he's on a pace right now that would exceed that. So the power for me to be already at this point in his career, somebody that has that element to his game. And we'll see, like maybe he ends the season on that original path I had expected of 15 to 17 home runs and he kind of tapers off. But with what he's done so far, adding that to what I expected to be the on base, the go in there and grind long at bats, kind of lead off guy mentality, to be pairing those two things together already, really impressive. And I guess I don't know really what I expected of him defensively, knowing like, okay, he's been a shortstop for his whole career. That is an indicator that he will be a good second baseman. I never had a problem with the Cardinals keeping him at short until they were ready to call him up, basically, because shortstop's the hardest position to play, and you can adjust to a lesser rigorous position. He's done that. Like he's a Gold Glove candidate, in my opinion, with the way that he's played second base. So the power and just how polished he is with the glove are the two things that I think are standing out the most, because everything else I kind of expected. But when you add those two elements to the baseline that we kind of figured he would have from an on-base perspective, you've got a really special player in the making.
So when we compile all of that together, then I have to ask you about a potential contract extension. You look at guys around the league, guys are getting paid younger than ever. And when you look at someone that can be the face of a future, that can be, like I mentioned earlier, a building block, a cornerstone, JJ Wetherholt is an option just as good as any in, I would argue, Major League Baseball. So let me ask you this. Contract extension, what are your thoughts on it? Do you expect this to be something that the Cardinals should be doing sooner than later? What do you think a ballpark could be? Just kind of give me your blurted out thoughts on a potential contract extension for JJ Wetherholt.
So I think there's some math that would be involved in this, because the challenge relative to some of the other contracts recently that you would point to, Connor Griffin as one, signed for 9 years and $140 million as a rookie coming on the scene with the Pirates. Kevin McGonigle with the Tigers, was he 8 and $150? I'm trying to remember how many years that deal was. So like that's the ballpark that everybody wants to kind of make as a comparison. I think it's tricky with JJ because of the age. Griffin's 19 when he signs that deal. McGonigle's 21. Wetherholt's 23 and turns 24, I want to say, in September. So you're like, well, that doesn't really matter, right? Because service time is all that matters. But not really when you talk about these differences, because when you sign an 8-9 year contract as a 19-year-old, you're going to hit free agency at 28, 29. Right. McGonigle, his was 8 and he's 21, so he'll be 29. And look, we know that the whole CBA renegotiation has to happen, and maybe that fundamentally changes the economics of the sport and the way that it plays out. But right now, we are under what we're operating under. You get 6 years of team control, and so when you sign an 8-year contract, that team's buying out 2 years. We sign a 9-year contract, that team is buying out 3 years at the end of free agency, and those are the years that matter the most when you're talking about like how the dollars go up. Because right now, 3 years of pre-arb, guys don't make money during that. Even during arbitration, it's capped what you're going to make. So for 6 of those 8 or 9 years on a contract for these guys, it is capped in a way. But the team is getting the security and the certainty of having them for, hey, what if they're superstars like we think they're going to be? We get them for a little bit longer than if we had to, try to compete with the free agent market after their 6th year. The thing with those guys, though, is they're going to get another bite at the apple of free agency at an age that is conducive to another long and prosperous contract. Whereas with Wetherholt, if he were going to give up that same number of years after the 6, if it's an 8-year contract, a 9-year contract, you're talking about, just because of his age, him getting into 31, 32 years old. And then what does baseball a decade from now look like when it comes to free agent contracts for guys in their early 30s? Because we already have seen that shift in recent years, past 5 to 10 years or so, maybe even longer than that. Well, that's not really an age that guys are getting those types of deals. So that second bite at the apple becomes tricky. So should the Cardinals sign him to one of those deals? Yeah. And I would make him the highest paid one of that grouping just because I think that gives him the best chance. Like 9 and 140 for Griffin. If you wanted to do 9 and 151 to say, hey, I got more guarantees than McGonigle, I got, the same number of years as Griffin. I think so far we see JJ Wetherholt as a more polished player than those guys. Certainly than Griffin. McGonigle, I admittedly haven't looked at his baseball card in the last couple of days, but I think JJ, the defense is super solid. The on base skill is super solid. The fact that he's already displaying power, I don't know what more we would necessarily need to see. If I'm the Cardinals, yeah, dude, I want him for as long as possible. And I would be willing to pay a little bit of a premium because I know that he would be making a concession relative to, I can't just stick those contracts on him of what those other guys got because his is a little bit of a different situation because of where that would take him to age-wise after a contract like that. So knowing that, I think JJ would have to, in my opinion, get something more robust than those guys just because of that economic aspect of it. If I'm the Cardinals, I think I'd be willing to do that, to plant my flag, to say, this is the face or one of the faces of the franchise moving into an era where we are going to have winning baseball. That's a message you can send to the fans as well. I think that would be good all around. If I'm JJ Wetherholt, am I signing that contract? Maybe not. From his standpoint, I could see a lot of arguments to just playing it out a little bit. And then the closer you get to free agency, the more you're able to have, those contracts that start with a 2 instead of necessarily starting with a 1. I think that is a really interesting argument from his perspective, where it's dude, right now, if he just wants to go out and play baseball, I wouldn't blame him one bit because I think he's in a really good spot. Obviously on the field, obviously loves being with the team. But from that perspective, your whole career ahead of you, I think he's in a really good position of, let's just go out and show what I can do. And the rest of that stuff will work itself out. So I would say, don't look at the Cardinals and say, I can't believe they didn't sign him, because it does take 2. And if I'm JJ Wetherholt, I do have those considerations to think of.
Brendan, moving on to another player who's had a great start to the year. No player really on the Cardinals roster has taken a bigger 180 on his career path more than Jordan Walker, who's put up monster numbers really to start off the year. We know about all of the adjustments that he's made in the batter's box this year, but what can we attribute to the success to as far as how he got to this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting with Walker because during the years of him struggling, feels like we talked about his swing mechanics and the minutia of his batting stance and all of those sorts of things more than with any other player. And maybe the reason for that should be obvious. A couple of things. He's a really big dude. He's tall, very unique aspect of that. So when he's struggling, you think, hey, I'm an armchair hitting coach. I can figure out that it's because of this, that, or the other. And everybody's got an opinion, right? That's the outside stuff. On the inside stuff within the organization, they were tweaking what he was doing with relative frequency. And did it get to a point where you're Jordan Walker, you've had all the success in the world at every level, and you get to the big leagues, and now everybody's trying to start screwing with what you're doing, but not for nothing, because you haven't had the same level of consistency and success that you're used to seeing. So, I think that's been a journey for him over multiple years to kind of figure out at the big league level, how different is it really from the other levels where I've always been able to mash without really having to be perfect when it comes to the attention to those details of how are guys trying to pitch me, stuff like that. Where now I feel like Jordan Walker, yeah, he'll swing through some breaking stuff as a lot of power hitters in baseball will, but I think he has a much better idea and is much quicker to snap back into the adjustment when he kind of is lost in the desert for a little bit. He's lost in the desert for a couple of days or a couple of at-bats instead of for weeks at a time like we had seen in previous years. I think the ability to snap back into focus and go, hey, what's happening is part of the game, and I don't have to feel the pressure of an offer that then turns into a spiral, because that's the game at the big league level, and I can make the adjustment. I'm good enough. I'm savvy enough. I'm in tune enough with my the mental side of my game to be able to take the approach that gets me a good productive at bat the next time up, and not necessarily gearing that toward the results, but toward the process. It sounds super cliche, guys, and even you've heard this when we ask Jordan Walker about different things. I've gotten to the point where there will never be another question coming out of my mouth asking him about mechanics, because I honestly think that stuff's going to be what it is, and he's going to work on that with the hitting coaches. But is his approach mentally in the box where it needs to be? The mechanics will fix itself the next day in the cage, but I think he's done a really good job of getting to the point where that's not as much a part of when he's in there battling. He's not thinking about the mechanics, and that's kind of the goal, is to be like, I'm going to grind the mechanical aspects and the tape and the iPad and doing all that stuff in the cage in the afternoon before a game. But in the game, he's really been trying to just leave it there. And as Ollie Marmol has said, like, if he's out there just thinking about competing with the pitcher, that's something that's going to give him success. So I think it's still a work in progress where you're never going to bat 1,000 on, hey, did I take every at bat today in a way that like really gave me my best chance? Maybe not. But it's impressive to think that he hit all those home runs and then he went a couple of weeks without one. And we're like, oh, it's this slump for Jordan Walker. Here we go. And now he's having a hot stretch that's almost just as good as the first one was, minus some of the home run numbers, but he's hitting doubles, right? He's taking those good at bats and helping the Cardinals win games. I don't think his OPS is going to end at 960 or whatever, but to me, it's clear that Jordan Walker has leveled up in a way that you can expect at the end of the season. Like, that OPS doesn't start with a 5, guys. I don't think it starts with a 6. I think he's going to end up having enough good process days throughout a season where the numbers will be there at the end.
I think that a good portion of fans would have argued that regardless of performance, Jordan Walker would have probably been the guy that would have been getting the majority of the reps in right field. Now he's a lock. That slam dunk, that is his spot in right field. And why that matters now is that all of a sudden there are 2 spots that we're talking about the Cardinals being able to utilize and fill in the outfield rather than 3. And that's going to get even smaller eventually, because this past week, Ollie Marmol announced that Lars Nootbaar would be beginning a rehab assignment on May 12th, which would mean that it lines up for a return to the majors in either late May or early June, as long as there are no setbacks. We know that Nootbaar is pretty much locked up for, once healthy, he is going to be the go-to left fielder for the Cardinals. So it leaves center field, and it leaves Victor Scott, and it leaves Nathan Church. And the question really is the center field battle as simple as whoever has the better numbers? How do you expect for the Cardinals to be able to navigate their use of whoever is in center field once Lars Nootbaar is to return from the injured list?
Yeah, the good news, like, I understand the question. The good news about the answer is that you don't have to give it today. Lars Nootbaar is another 4 weeks away from returning. I think it'll probably be June before he's back. So, like, you've got a lot of time to be able to run Nathan Church and Victor Scott and see what both guys are doing at the time. It would be very easy right now to look at Victor's numbers, and even after a good game last night, his OPS is start with a 4. So he's not had offensively the season that he wants to have. And you might say, well, Lars Nootbaar is interesting because he wasn't great last year. But then you look at his numbers, and it's like our version of he had a bad year was a 686 OPS where he was 97 in OPS plus, so almost league average. Like, that's leaps and bounds above what Victor's doing right now. There's no doubt about that. And I do think Nathan Church can handle center field defensively. You're going to watch for another month of what's Nathan Church doing at the plate, what are the adjustments that Victor Scott is making at the plate, and kind of figuring out a way to run that by the time you get there. Gets really interesting. I wonder if at some point would they say, hey, to get an extra bat in the lineup, do we try to have a little more of Ivan Herrera catching? Or my opinion is that they'll say, no, really what's working right now is what we've been doing when it comes to kind of divvying up the catcher role. So that's keeping everybody fresh and everybody successful. So that, yeah, I don't know that you're going to be able to steal some at bats for any extra outfielder with the DH as much as you might think. So yeah, that gets to be an interesting conversation for sure. And it's something to watch. I think maybe one of the biggest storylines to watch over the next month. But I do think you have close to a month before that ends up being a real conversation. But it wouldn't be difficult to see that, like, let those guys both run it out, and then whoever's performing better kind of gets more of the opportunity. It's not a platoon, so that makes it tricky. Like, they're both left-handed hitters, right, so you can't necessarily divide it up that way. But, like, I think the idea that the Cardinals are playing really good baseball right now, and even if you got last year's Lars Nootbaar in that spot where it's like a league average bat to basically be the equivalent of batting ninth, or, he's up in the lineup and you bump Church down, 1 through 9, you would really have a very potent lineup, or at least, like, the potency at the top and then the steadiness in the middle to back where you're not really giving a lot away, at least on paper, would be a huge win. And then what if Lars Nootbaar is what he had been prior to 2025 when he was just a really good hitter for the bulk of his career? So yeah, I think the exciting prospect to get him back if all goes well with that. I think there's still time because, if Victor Scott can pick up where he left off last night and continue to play well, that's going to be an even tougher decision for Ollie Marmol when the time comes.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I tell you what, I could have these conversations for hours on end. It's been very enjoyable. Brendan Schaeffer, writer for MLB.com, STL Sports Central, host of The Big Show on KTGR and B-Shave Daily. So let me go ahead and leave you with this question, Brendan, as we wrap up. And it's going to be pretty generalized, but it's what the conversation in large part has been built around on this episode. Is the Cardinals' early season success legit? And if so, how legitimate is it in your eyes?
Yeah, I think the Cardinals, like before the season, I was in that like 79 to 80 range on wins, which, Vegas told you 69.5. And I thought, I just don't really see why they would be that bad. I think the pitching has been what has stood out when you think about the starters, that nobody's really getting shelled. Like that's not happening hardly at all. Even you could say, well, like the Kyle Leahy ERA before last night was in the fives, and he didn't have a single game where he gave up more than 4 earned runs. So it's like even the games that are not good from an ERA standpoint, that's like a 7.5 ERA or whatever. Those aren't killing you because in theory, you can win some of those games. You could be down 4-2 leaving that game and you're in every game. Cardinals haven't had many games recently where they're just out of it and it's like, yep, it's a blowout, it's a laugher. Dustin May had a couple of those early, has been 4 out of 5 quality starts since. So like starting pitching has been a pleasant surprise. Palante has been really, really solid and sharp in a way that I don't know if it's crazy to think he can keep doing that. Like he's leveled up to me as a pitcher. I would say, is he a little bit above his head at 3.7 ERA? Yeah, maybe he's more of a 4.1 type of guy, but that's tenable. Cardinals have a tenable rotation right now. Bullpen, we know, has been kind of adventurous at times, but if you're going to get the back end guys giving you what they've given you, then I think that's really, I'm not going to say all that matters, but in terms of being able to lock down the wins that you should have, like they've done a nice job of knowing that those guys, when they get to the 8th, 9th inning, they're largely going to be able to hold it. You want to continue to find other guys that can help out. Maybe Soriano emerges as he's continued to do. Maybe Gordon Graceffo. I know he gave up a homer in the game on Monday, but maybe he's somebody that can continue to level up into the role that he's serving. And the bullpen can end up being kind of okay. The ERA for the bullpen's been bad, right? Like it's toward the bottom of the league, and yet they're still finding ways to win the games that they're ahead late. So that's a good sign. So it boils down to the offense. But like base running defense, that's been fantastic and is going to continue to be because that's the way they coach it. I think the coaching is a big element of the success and is part of the reason they're going to be able to win more games than on paper they're supposed to. So like that's baked into my assumption too. Offensively, though, you just go through 1 through 9 and think about like who are the guys that aren't going to be able to sustain what they're doing. I think Jordan Walker is probably going to come down a little bit, but like I said, I think there's a floor to him that we wouldn't have felt confident was there in years past. Other than Walker, I don't really know that there's anybody, and you can correct me if you want me to kind of opine on a guy in particular. I don't think there's anybody that I look at and say like the drop-off's coming. No, I think largely you got guys that are doing what they're capable, and maybe even a few guys who there's still more in the tank than what they've given in 1 or 2 instances. Add a Lars Nootbaar, and you're like, wow, you've got something here. So like, I'm not worried that the offense is going to drop off. I think they're going to hit fewer home runs than they have relative to the league. That'll settle out a little bit. But I think they're a genuinely solid lineup and one that might even get better when you add Lars Nootbaar. Can the starting pitching stay healthy and continue to not get blown up? If the answer to that is yes, I don't care if all their ERAs are 4.5. Like what they're doing is, I mean, like McGreevy won't be 2.5, but like what they're doing, if they continue to just get those 5-6 inning outings and be in the game when you get to the 7th, they're the type of team that is positioned to win more games than they're supposed to. So I don't know if they're going to have the same winning percentage at the end of September as they have today, but are they going to suddenly like become the worst team and lose 90 games? I don't really see that happening. No.
A lot of reason to be excited about what you're seeing in the early going from the St. Louis Cardinals, building somewhere, I think. Being able to combine and have the long-term success or at least find a way to be building towards that while also seeing a very great start to 2026 in the win column as well. Brenden Schaeffer, we greatly appreciate the time, and we look forward to having you on again soon.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you guys.
We're going to go ahead and wrap things up on the other side right here on the Loose Sports Talk podcast. Welcome back to the Loose Sports Talk podcast. It's a pleasure having Brenden Schaeffer. Appreciate him joining, and a lot of good stuff from his time with us. Daniel, any notable takeaways for you?
Obviously, with seeing the news the past couple of weeks of rookies signing their long-term contracts, I thought JJ Wetherholt was a pretty good point there. Just because his age, he's a little older, like Brendan mentioned, he's almost 24, whereas Griffin's 19, and that changes things further down the road when the contract runs out. So I thought that was a pretty interesting point. But I shouldn't say many, I should say probably about all Cardinals fans hope that we get him locked up for the long term here soon.
Yeah, that was really good analysis as far as why it makes sense for the Cardinals, maybe not entirely for JJ. It's going to be very interesting to see how those negotiations occur. Hopefully something happens sooner than later. The longer that it takes that we don't see anything, it makes me wonder more so if we are going to see anything, but we'll have to wait and see. Regardless, JJ Wetherholt and what he has been able to do in the early going of 2026 has been super encouraging when you look at the future of the St. Louis Cardinals. And that kind of leaves us with that final question. Are the Cardinals legit? I thought Brenden Schaeffer gave a great answer there just a moment ago. My biggest advice to Cardinals fans at this point, enjoy the ride. Enjoy what you are seeing up to this point because listen, the Cardinals are 7 games above 500 as we're recording. They've won 60% of the games in which they've played. Are they going to finish the year with a 60 win percentage? No, they're not. I mean, that just doesn't happen in general in Major League Baseball. So that's not going to happen. But you have seen them prove that they can win in this style. How legitimate can this style be? It's going to depend a lot on the starting pitching and what Brendan said, if they're able to survive without getting absolutely shelled. When you compare May of 2025 to now where the Cardinals are, the biggest difference is that the starting pitching faltered. Is the starting pitching going to absolutely collapse here down? That's going to be the biggest question. Last week we talked about the Cardinals stretch. So far they've done more than that. They've been very good. It's been a very encouraging sign. It's been a big reason as to why the Cardinals have been able to have the success that they have had up to this point. I completely agree that there is very little reason for me to not believe, that the core that the Cardinals have, the 5 that I mentioned, that they can't continue doing to an extent what they are doing right now. I have zero concern about Alec Burleson, about Ivan Herrera. I like what Masyn Winn is doing at the plate right now. I'd like to see his on-base percentage tick up and not rely solely on his batting average nearly as much. JJ Wetherholt is only going to get better. I'm very firm in that belief. Jordan Walker, what we've seen in the early goings, great. Let's hope that we can continue to see him make adjustments during periods of struggle. This is a core that you can build around. All of a sudden, over half of your lineup is looking really solid. And then you add on the other contributing pieces that have been really good in Nathan Church, in Pedro Pajes, even Nolan Gorman has had some moments of looking sharp. Still overall has been a below average season for him, but maybe could be breaking out of something here soon. I think there's a lot of reason to be encouraged by what you have seen from this Cardinal lineup. Maybe it doesn't translate into 90 wins. It probably doesn't. That isn't something that anyone was expecting, but I would be shocked if there's anyone out there that still thinks that we're looking at a team that's 68, 69 win team this year. I never thought they were that, but I'd be shocked if there's anyone out there that thinks that this is what this team is now. And a lot of that has to do with the way in which the team has bought into the style of play that they have. And you have to tip your cap to Oliver Marmol in this coaching staff, as well as Chaim Bloom and what they are trying to build as we look to 2026 and beyond. So it certainly has been encouraging here in the early going. Let's hope that it continues and that we're able to have more episodes like this where we're talking about how good the Cardinals look, unfortunately for the large stretch of as the podcast has existed, there haven't been enough episodes like this. So let's hope that this is to continue. Be sure to like and subscribe to STL Sports Central on YouTube. Go ahead and follow us as well on Instagram, X, and Facebook at Lou Sports Talk _. Greatly appreciate you being a part of episode number 110. That's a wrap.